chemistry? Everything. And you don't change the pH of the soil overnight. And so you've got to do something to help to mitigate those pH effects. And salt, high salt concentrations generally result in a pH differential that's extreme. And humic acid can help to mitigate those pH extremes on either side. Does that make sense?
Here. Now, keep in mind what Jay has been telling you about the low salts and in-furrow and how they work and that type of thing, because these tests here that we run here had 2 Burgo drills. It was Florian that run the test, and he took 1 Burgo drill and converted it over to liquid, left the other one in dry. We put in 50 pounds, or this is no starter, liquid starter, and there is the dry starter up in here on this, right in here. So we put 50 pounds total product in furrow of 1152O. And take a look here. Look at the germination difference in this. You've got maturity heads here, mature heads here, you've got immature heads here. Take a look at the leaf size on this one here, how those leaves are dried up, and then the stand in this particular spot. So that there yielded 52 bushel, and then we come to this at 77 bushel. Take a look at the leaf size on those. Guys, there's quite a little difference. And as we get into this, you'll find out that leaf size makes a lot of difference. Yeah.
Is that durum or hard red spring wheat?
Hard red. Hard red.
Hard red. Okay.
This all has to do, leaf size all has to do with photosynthesis. That's going to be the #1 point that we're going to drive home to you guys today is photosynthesis. That it drives the whole deal along with pH. And so you got 77 bushel here, 6 gallons of LS624. So if you was to foliar, or let's say spray a fungicide, suppose the fungicide would work on this one here? Probably not real well. You don't have a lot of leaf area to go to. But then you can go to this one here, you've got all kinds of leaves. Something to think about.
And keep in mind that when we said that there was less cost needed to get the same results early on, that 6 gallons of 624-6 is roughly 17 pounds POS. 50 pounds of 1152O is 23.5, 24 pounds of POS. So you're putting less in. It's a lower salt index. You're not harming the seed. 1152O, when that proton, that hydrogen atom is abstracted, it goes from MAP to DAP, monoammonium phosphate to diammonium phosphate. That diammonium phosphate breaks down very quickly in the soil, at least the nitrogen does, into anhydrous ammonia. You wouldn't put anhydrous ammonia in your seed furrow along with your seeds. You're going to cause seed damage. Now there's not a lot in there, but there's enough in there to cause seed damage, to reduce the population that is the potential of your yield in there.
Has anyone told you about this stuff? Explained this to you? That's why we're here. We're not, yeah, we're here to sell product, of course, but we want you to understand how our products are made and how they're used so you can go make that business decision again. This one here is Jerry Burgo called us and wanted us to come and give a presentation, so we didn't give him a presentation a couple of years ago. And he decided to do, take a drill, 75-foot Burgo drill, split it in 25-foot sections, and leave one of them as a dry, and converted the other two 25-foot sections over liquid. Each one of these has 15 pounds of phosphate in furrow, and they also have 15 pounds of phosphate in mid-row bander. Now, I want to make it perfectly clear, we're not against the Burgo drills and putting the mid-row bander, putting fertilizer through the mid-row bander. Not at all. I think it's a great deal. Jerry built a career on these, and they work very well. We just think that he needs to place the fertilizer in furrow and use the mid-row bander for the balance of the phosphate needs that he may need, and along with any nitrogen needs that he may need. So that's why, that's the avenue that we're going. So Jerry did this, and he set up cameras, and he took pictures every day of after it was planted. And you can see here 1152.0, see the stand here, you can see the 1034.0, it's getting a little better, and then you get over here at the 624.6, and it's a fairly good stand. One thing I've learned about canola that I didn't know 7 years ago, because I didn't know even what it looked like 7 years ago, is that it's more like a weed. You can take this stand right here, and there may be one come up here, there probably is going to be some come up in between here that you're not seeing right now. And you're going to have some late germinators, you're going to have some early germinators. It may be due to the 1152.0, could be. But what will happen, they'll go ahead and produce. Now you get a corn plant at home that comes up 4 days later than the one before it, and you might as well go out with a shovel and chop it off, because it's not going to get the sunlight. It won't produce an ear. It'll be the bottom of the litter, so to speak. So what I'm seeing here, and I suggest to you, if you're used to this or this here, and you're seeding 5 pounds of the acre, 4 or 5 pounds of the acre of canola seed, why don't you seed 1.5 pounds and use 624 if you're happy with this stand? Something to think about. Here's some peas. This was taken by a drone. You can probably guess where the 66 bushel is and where the 44 bushel is. This was all drilled the same day. Everything was the same. The only difference on the whole field was the 4 gallon of 624.
That 4 gallon, where do you put it with the seed?
Yes, sir. Right with the seed. Just like we did right at the beginning. The fertilizer there and the seed right on top of it. Yep. Jerry has developed shoes, openers to go right in there.
You could find it anywhere, Dodge or Atom Jet or Virgo.
Yeah, all the drills.
They make them now.
Yep.
Same with liquid fertilizer? Same boot?
It's a different boot. It needs to be right with the seed. The liquid fertilizer is on the side. We really right below the seed. So.
Florian and Warren both know or can show you and tell you how to convert your seed tenders from a dry into a liquid. It's really fairly simple to do. Yeah, it costs some money. The shoes run about $80, $85, is that right?
If you take the whole kit and everything.
The whole kit and everything? Okay, all right, there you go. So get with him afterwards if you're thinking about it or you want some more questions about how to convert it over. Get with him and
Patterson, they make some good kit for that now. So
okay.
It's mainstream everywhere. Every dealer could have it.
Okay. Okay, questions? Any more questions? All righty. Here's David Hula with 532 bushel corn, 172 bushel soybeans, 94 bushel peas, 250 bushel wheat, and then Florian with his 116 bushel canola crop. Okay, what do all those have in common? Other than a lot of rain.
They're hard to believe.
Tax problem.
Tax problem. Very good. That's the first time I've heard that. Very good. They all, yeah, you got me all flustered here. I never heard that before. They all do in furrow below the seed, every one of them, and they all do a foliar up to 7, 8 times as far as the wheat goes. Now, you're sitting here thinking, okay, right, I need to leave. I'm not going to listen to this guy tell me I need to go out there 5 or 6 or 7 times. I'm not telling you that. I'm showing you that these guys have a way that they figured out how to increase their yield and their profitability by doing this. Now, they spend a lot of money doing this. We all know that. But can maybe 1 or 2 times of going over it with the foliar or using the in-furrow starter would help you? See, you can, our products you can mix right with your fungicide, your herbicide. When you're going across the field, you can go ahead and throw these in. It's not like an extra trip across the field. So just keep that in mind. We had, in 2013, we did a chart here as far as return on your money. Basically the XRN, these are all plots that we had that we used XRN through a center pivot, through a drill, through a seeder, everything that we used XRN on. And over that period of plots, we had 32 that year, averaged about 11% return on your money if you use those products. Those guys right down here were in Missouri, the plots that I had in Missouri, and they dried up. It quit raining in about the middle of June and never rained till August, and of course topsoil down there is about 8 to 10 inches deep. So they have to have a rain about every 2 or 3 days down there to make things work, and it didn't do that. So here's 14, about the same, 11. Here's 15. We had around 50 plots that year. Had about a 16% overcheck increase. And then we had the same approximately 16. I haven't put 17 together yet, but it should be, the way it looks, about the same, 11 to 12%. So what we're saying is Kugler foliar fertilizer, and we'll let Jay take over from there.
Okay, how many of you know how photosynthesis works? Geez, everything you do, it depends on it. Okay, a photon from the sun migrates itself from the center of the sun to the outer layer and is on its way to the earth. It's traveling at the speed of light. It slams into a leaf. That leaf is made up of 3 different types of openings. One is the stomata, which is the breathing mechanism. It breathes in carbon dioxide and it breathes out oxygen. That's the respiration and expiration side of the photosynthesis equation. And then you have polar cuticular pores, which is where foliar feeding is initiated and takes place. And then you have the chloroplast. And the chloroplast is what that photon slams into. Keeping in mind that on a corn leaf, let's just use that as an example because it's such a big leaf, you have a trillion photons hitting that leaf every second. Now the vast majority of them bounce off, and that's why we see color. It's that reflection, at least in this atmosphere here. Now if you can trap that photon in that chloroplast for 1/1000th of a second longer, you have dramatically increased the rate of photosynthesis. And when you do that, you increase the amount of water that that plant is taking up. And remember that all of your nutrients have to be dissolved in water or that plant won't recognize them. So if you can increase that water uptake, which is also increasing nutrient uptake, you can then increase more biomass. You get more leaves out. And then that process continues over and over and over again until the plant genetics tell you that it's time to harvest that crop. We are a supplement. We are not an answer for fertility in general. If you try, you could foliar feed your crop without putting anything into the soil. You wouldn't last much more than about half a season because it would be so expensive it would break you. So, again, we're not suggesting that you foliar feed 8 times to get 250 bushels of wheat. we're suggesting that you utilize the genetics that have been developed over the past 25 years, and you foliar feed, you do it once, you're probably going to see a benefit. You do twice, you're going to see more of a benefit. If you're on pivot, every time that pivot goes around, you put a gallon of the material in there. Every single time that you do that. And we regularly produce 300 bushel corn in high desert environments that are irrigated. We non-irrigated canola, 116 bushels. That ain't bad. Of the last 5 years, he's won the canola challenge 4 times, 3 times with 100 plus bushels an acre. And this isn't on a garden plot. This is on a quarter section. And so, but he foliar feeds 4 times. If you want those yields to increase, you've got to give that plant a chance to kick itself into high gear and to increase that rate of photosynthesis.
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
Lyle, can I put you on the spot? You've used our products. See any increase? I mean, last year was a tough one, okay? I understand that. You've been, in the past, you've used them.
I can speak more for the humic than I can the 178.
Okay?
Because I made the decision, because we weren't getting no rain, so I didn't use the 178.
Good call.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, why foliar feed? Well, foliar applications cannot by themselves meet the total nutrient demand. There are inherent nutrient uptake inefficiencies from the soil. A physical inefficiency would be compacted soils. Foliar feeding can help to correct that. A chemical inefficiency would be those pH differences that we talked about. You're not getting enough phos from the soil because it's being tied up by those positively charged ions at the high and the low pH that are never going to be available. So foliar feeding can be a strategy to help you through that. And biological would be in cold soils, bugs don't move to the same degree that they move in warmer soils. And you need those bugs to break down the nutrients that you're applying to the soil so that they become recognizable to that root. So then it can be taken up and then go through other chemical processes in the plant. It's not new, documented as early as 1844. I don't know a farmer that doesn't have either access to or owns a sprayer, and of course I would say that 20% of our product goes through aircraft because it's very efficient. Part of that because late season application of foliar products can dramatically increase your yields. And I'll show you why in a second. Which is a result of advanced crop genetics. How many of you are old enough to remember the switch over from Roundup or conventional to Roundup Ready? Okay, did your yields increase or decrease?
Increase,
Why?
better weed control.
Okay, do you ever think that perhaps it was genetics as well? 50 years ago, you were pulling out 30 bushel of wheat. Now you're pulling out 250 bushel wheat. Think about that for a minute. Now, not
I
everybody.
give the credit to the air drills.
That could be a part of it too, but the genetics have changed dramatically over that period of time. And those genetics are allowing for later season application of fertilizer. In crop fertility is the future. Not putting all your groceries in the ground up front, but spoon feeding that crop through the course of the season. That is the future of fertility, at least in agriculture. And without question, equipment plays a very large role in that. Here's just an example. Here's this Purdue University data. They're comparing conventional corn versus BT gene corn or Roundup Ready. At about R5, the conventional corn stops taking up nutrients. On the right, the BT gene, it's taking up nutrients at the time you're firing your combine up. That's the difference in genetics today versus 30 years ago. Look at phosphorus uptake, about the same. R5, it quits taking up phosphorus. It begins to catabolize the plant itself and put that energy into the fruit, whatever that is that you're trying to grow. On the right, look at the slope of that line. It's taking up fully 40% of its phosphorus needs in the last stages of growth. Before, you wouldn't even consider doing that, but why is it taking up that phosphorus? because it's demanding energy. And as it demands more energy, you're not going to increase your yield late on in the season. You've got the number of ears of corn already defined. You've already got defined the number of kernels on that ear of corn, but you're increasing weight dramatically, and you get paid for weight. It's exactly what we see with the canola. It takes up fully 40%, even more, in the last 2 stages of growth. And if you foliar feed at those stages, you can pick up a 15% increase because of that demand for that phos as a result of genetic changes over time. Same thing with potassium. This one's the most dramatic. Halfway through the growing season on a conventional corn source, it stops taking up potassium. It's still on the Roundup Ready, taking up potassium right up to the point where you're firing your combine up. And we have these charts for all different kinds of nutrients, micronutrients, and it's all the same. It continues with new genetics to take up fertility in general, and especially phosphorus late in the season. And that's why foliar feeding late is an excellent strategy. Foliar nutrients are mobilized directly into the plant leaf, which is the goal of fertility to begin with. You put fertilizer in the soil, whatever the source is, whether it's synthetic or natural. You want to get that plant up, you want to get those leaves out. Lee said, remember photosynthesis. There's 2 processes in the plant that are dependent on each other. One is called nitrate reductase and the other one's called photosynthesis. And without either one of those, your plant isn't growing. It's just simply not going to grow. Okay, why is chlorophyll so important? When you foliar feed a nitrogen source, you're making that nitrogen immediately available to the surface of that leaf, and you're creating more chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the dark green. That's what you want to see on your crop. You don't want to see it yellow. You don't want to see it light green. You want to see that nice dark green because that's increased chlorophyll. That's why nitrogen is the preferred foliar source, because it helps that plant to make more chlorophyll. And if you think of chlorophyll as a greenhouse, sitting on top of that chloroplast, trapping that photon for another nanosecond, another billionth of a second, you've dramatically increased the rate of photosynthesis. And then you've created an environment where you're taking up more water, which is where all your nutrients are dissolved, creating more biomass, and the circle continues. Isn't that kind of a neat chemical structure? Did you ever wonder why magnesium as a micronutrient was so important? Look at what's right in the center of that molecule. Top dress is not foliar. You're not doing anything other than feeding the soil while that 28% is on its way down to it, and you're burning your leaves in the process. Top dress does not foliar feed. It is not even close to foliar feeding. And there, I'll show you why in a second. Effective foliar products feed through the waxy cuticle layer, stimulate photosynthesis by increasing chlorophyll on the leaf. You get a good green leaf, you get a positive foliar effect. Low salt starters, the stuff that we talked about before we got into the foliar side, don't foliar feed. They do not have the attributes. So if you ask me to buy my 624-6 and foliar feed it, I'm going to sell it to you if you're persistent, but I'm going to tell you it's not going to work. It does not have the attribute. The only one thing it has of the 4 things that it needs is nitrogen. So yeah, you'll get a little bit, but why not use something that's going to give you an 80% efficiency in terms of foliar feeding? Humic acids don't foliar feed well. There's a portion of them that do, and that's that soluble carbon. That will go into that leaf structure very readily. But the molecule's too big. It won't go through that, and it's not going to break down quickly over time. In the soil it will, because you've got microbes down there chewing on it, gnawing on it, and releasing that soluble carbon, which is the key. Salts, copper sulfate, iron sulfate, magnesium sulfate. They're never going to foliar feed. They have everything against them. There's no nitrogen in them. Lignosulfonates, etc. This is what you need. You need something that's non-ionic, which means it can't have a net charge on the molecule. Starter fertilizer has a net charge on the molecule. It's negative. A non-polar species. Polarity is, think of it as a balloon. At the end that you're blowing up, that would be your positively charged ion. Where that balloon goes up, that would be a huge electron cloud associated with the negatively charged species. And of course, electrons are negatively charged. And so polarity is also ionic, but it also has an uneven distribution of those electrons in the molecule. Remember that it's feeding through a polar cuticular pore. You got a polar molecule trying to feed through a polar orifice? It's never going to happen because that orifice is also negatively charged. Have you ever tried to put two magnets, same pole, together? It's very difficult. That's exactly what's happening there. It's a repelling action. Organic molecules must be present. Organic meaning carbon. The study of carbon is what is defined as organic chemistry. And so carbon needs to be present because carbon affects the polarity and the ionic nature of the product. It tends to diminish the effects of those, and nitrogen needs to be present, and urea is our choice. Because urea is the perfect foliar mechanism. They found that out back in the 1950s. I'll show you exactly why that happened here in a second. Our product, again, is 65% urea. You can't get that much urea into a liquid solution of water. But there's no water in our product. It's all 100% polymethylene urea triazone. There are no nitrates in there, and a completely non-burning form. So, increased chlorophyll, photosynthesis rate increases, water and soil nutrient uptake is increased. Now your biomass is increased, you get more leaf structure out there, more surface area open to the sun. Back in 1952, Michigan State University and the Atomic Energy Commission wanted to see what happened to crops in general as a result of nuclear atmospheric testing, which was ongoing in the 50s. And so they took a urea source, or a nitrogen source is urea, potassium, and phosphorus, and the Atomic Energy Commission, their contribution was to supply those products that were tagged with a radioisotope. Now it can be followed through the plant. And so they put a measured amount, in this case it was on a cotton leaf, and they measured the time that it took to translocate from the leaf all the way down to the roots. This is just straight urea. As you can see, the urea was 100% absorbed by that plant in 18 hours. See, that's the value of urea out there. The only problem is that urea in a water solution burns your plant leaves. It will recover, but you've lost that photosynthesis during that time frame that that plant is recovering on that surface area that's damaged. And as you see, the phosphorus and the potassium also foliar fed, but not to the same degree. Why? They're probably salts that they put on. I don't know exactly what it was. But they were probably polar and they were probably ionic in nature, and urea is not. Urea exhibits all four of those things. Even distribution of electrons, no net charge on the molecule, contains carbon, and it also contains nitrogen. Just as emphasis, this is data that's more recent. Nitrogen as urea, this came from Purdue University. Time for 50% absorption of urea was a half an hour to 2 hours. And that just lends credibility to the original work that was done by Michigan State University and the Atomic Energy Commission. There's the molecule. Go to bed tonight dreaming of urea, okay? Here you have this oxygen. Huge electron cloud around it. That's just the nature of oxygen in general. But it's offset by the electron cloud that's around these two. So you have an even distribution of those electrons in the molecule. It is totally nonpolar because of that even distribution of electrons. There's no net charge on this molecule, so it's non-ionic. There's carbon present, and there's also nitrogen present. You got everything that you need for a good foliar product. Now imagine this molecule and 150,000 of them all reacted together, all attached at this point, or at this point, or at this point with another one. That's what our product is made up of. And it won't burn because it slow releases over time. This urea molecule also has a propensity right here, this double bond. This is called a carbonyl group, and it is particularly susceptible to ultraviolet attack. So when the sunlight hits it, ultraviolet radiation hits it, it cleaves that bond, makes those nitrogen atoms available for foliar feeding, and then that whole process continues. That nitrogen goes into the plant leaf, increases the chlorophyll, increasing the chlorophyll, traps that photon for longer, and starts that engine running that we call photosynthesis. This, now I really want you to dream about this one, because this is an actual representation of one unit of our KQXRN. Look at all the urea molecules. Here, 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 here. The little red things attaching them are called methylol units. We make our product with a prepolymer called tetramethylol urea. There's 4 methylol urea groups in there. We put that in a high pressure, high temperature reactor. We blanket it with methyl alcohol. The reason we do that is so that it doesn't react with itself as we're heating the reactor up. Heat is what initiates the process. The methanol not only is a protectant, but it becomes a reactant downstream. We get it going, we get it hot, and in an 18-ton reactor we add 9 tons of urea. You couldn't get that much into a liquid solution of water. And it's being vigorously agitated. In a high pressure, high temperature reactor, we want that methyl alcohol to stay liquid, hence the high pressure. And then at the last stages, we end up adding anhydrous ammonia, and of course that's in a liquid form, but we have it at high pressures so that it stays liquid as well. It doesn't flash off. And we make this little beast right here, triazone, by adding in the anhydrous ammonia. So this is called a polymethylene urea right here. That's a methylene urea group. There's one here. There's one here. And this is a triazone group. The triazone is a much more complex nitrogen-containing compound. And so we have 3 levels of slow release. We have little snippets of these, like that right there. That would be called an oligomer. An oligomer is a 1 or 2 or 3 molecule unit that goes into making up this whole thing. That is of a size that can be absorbed by that plant leaf already. So you get an immediate absorption